Hey there, Sebastian. Okay, so I just wanted to make this quick little video just because we got cut off the other day and didn't get to finish what we were talking about, and to just try to help you be able to best complete that final problem on your Chapter 3 test. So let me go ahead and kind of just finish that up for you. So all we're doing is taking a word problem and writing an objective function and the constraints. And we already did one of them here. But let's go ahead and do this one too. And then I'll talk a little bit about that problem that you're going to do for your Chapter 3 test, which is that last problem about the chairs and tables. All right. So we had already gotten into this a little bit. An airline operates two types of airplanes, the Airbus and Boeing. And if we kind of skip down to this last sentence here, we're ultimately trying to find the number of each type of airplane. So that tells you right there what your variables are going to be, that each of your variables is going to represent one of the different types of airplanes. So X is the number of Airbus planes and Y is the number of Boeing planes. It also tells us that we are trying to minimize our costs. So even though I didn't have you define Z here, although I probably should have, Z is going to represent cost because that's what we're trying to minimize. So your Z variables, whatever you're trying to maximize or minimize, in this case, we're trying to minimize cost. Then when it comes to the objective function is where we're going to write an equation that shows how we calculate that cost. So we're trying to minimize cost. So cost is Z. The objective function is going to be an equation where we take information from the problem and we write an equation that shows us how to calculate that thing we're trying to minimize, which is cost in this case. Okay, let's look at some of the information in the problem. Airbus can accommodate 20 first class, 50 tourist class, and 110 economy class. So it looks like they're going to tell us about how many of each kind of seat, each different kind of plane can accommodate. So we've got first class, tourist class, and economy class. Then it gives us those numbers for Boeing. It says the airline is contracted with a tour group to provide transportation for at least 400 first class. So, okay, so we had more information about the different kinds of seats. And then finally, it gives us information about cost. Okay, here we go. Airbus planes cost $1,100 per trip, and Boeing costs $1,500 per trip. So X is the number of Airbus trips, and Y is the number of Boeing. So Airbus costs $1,100, so we'll do 1,100 times X, since X is Airbus. And then Boeing is $1,500, so we'll add 1,500 times the number of Boeing trips, which is Y. So there's our objective function. So we've taken care of that. So we knew that Z was cost. We looked at the information in the problem that had to deal with cost, and that's how we wrote our objective function. Now let's look at our constraints. The constraints are going to have to do with that first class, tourist class, and economy class. And it's told us how many of each of those that Airbus and Boeing can accommodate. And then it's also told us kind of information about how many we have to be able to do at least for 400 first class and 750 tourist class and so on. Okay, so let's just look at first class. I'm going to write over this was your original test. I'm going to write over your work here. Let's just look at first class. So Airbus can do 20 first class, so we'll do 20X. How about Boeing? Boeing can do 18 first class, so we'll do 18Y. And it tells us we have to do at least 400 first class total. So this has to be at least 400, which means greater than or equal to 400. Make sure you get that inequality symbol correct. Now let's look at tourist class. I'll abbreviate and just say TC. Now Airbus can do 50 tourist class, so we'll do 50X. And then we'll add how many tourist class Boeing can do. Boeing can do 30 of those, so we'll do 30Y. And then down here it says we have to be able to accommodate at least 750 tourist class passengers. So this total number of tourist class has to be at least 750. Again, at least means greater than or equal to. Okay, finally, let's do economy class. For economy class, Airbus can do 110, so that'll be 110x plus. Boeing can do 44 economy class, so 44y. And down here it says we have to be able to fit at least 1,500 economy class passengers. So we'll go at least 1,500. And that's really it. The last thing we should do is to say that X and Y have to both be greater than or equal to 0. It doesn't make any sense for those to be negative. And that's it. So we've defined our variables. We decided what it was that we were maximizing or minimizing. In this case, we're minimizing cost. So cost was Z. We looked in the problem and looked for the information about cost and wrote an objective function. So that's going to be an equation. Then we write our constraints based on the other information in the problem. And this is what really kind of limits how many of each variable we're able to get. Now, when it comes to actually finishing the rest of the problem, which you're going to do on this last problem, it's going to involve graphing to actually solve the problem. I'm just going to walk you through this verbally. You're going to take each of those constraints and write them in slope-intercept form. So y equals mx plus b, right? So you're going to solve each of those equations for y. Now they're going to be inequalities, so keep that in mind, that it won't be equals, it'll be greater than or less than or equal to. Okay, so you're going to write them in slope-intercept form, and then you're going to graph each of those three inequalities. So I'm just going to kind of draw 3 lines here. I just randomly drew 3 lines. These 3 lines will not at all be representative of the actual graphs of these. I'm just illustrating a point. So you put those in slope-intercept form. You'll use the y-intercept and the slope to graph 3 lines. And then you use the inequality symbol, the greater than or less than, to decide whether to shade above or below each of those lines. So let's say you did all that shading and you ended up with this area here as your feasible region. Now, it could be any of these areas could end up as your feasible region. I'm just saying, let's just suppose it ends up being this area. So then you're going to take each of those corner points, the points that are the corners of your feasible region, you're going to take their coordinates and you're going to plug them in to that objective function. And that's going to tell you the cost that each of those XY combinations, the cost that each of those will produce. And in this case, we're looking for the minimum cost. So you're going to look at which of those gives you the minimum cost. Now, I would encourage you, if you feel like you need to go back and look at the unit or the chapter 3 folder and look at some of the example problems in the notes in that folder. Remember, the completed notes are on there, so you've got some example problems that are completely filled out. I would go to like the end of that chapter's notes where you'll find problems like the one that you're going to do for the test, and you can see some of those examples worked out for you, okay? So get that done as soon as you can. Send that to me today. I need to have that today, and then we'll move on and start talking about well, we've already said that you need to do that simplex quiz and the test that'll be available online for you. So you need to go back and review that stuff in the chapter 4 and 11 folder. There are videos over all of that. There are notes and completed notes over all of that. So the simplex quiz is being able to do a simplex maximization problem, all of the steps. And then the test is going to be the simplex maximization part plus the game theory stuff. And so you need to make sure you go over all those game theory things too. Once you are ready, so the quiz I already gave you, so you can take that, take pictures of it and send to me. Once you're ready to take that test, the test is actually in the chapter 4 and 11 folder. You can just go in and do it. It's already there. It's individually assigned to you. So you can just go in and do that. Once you've submitted that, please just let me know, because Schoology won't tell me when you've submitted it. I don't get a notification, and plus, I'll be on break, so I need to know that I need to go back and look at that, okay? So please let me know when you've got all those things finished, all right? That'll do it. Get this stuff done sooner rather than later, and then enjoy your break. All right. Have a good Christmas and New Year.